I want to share with you a bit of my story and how I re-encountered my soul. I was in my early 20s and studied anthropology at the University of Vienna when I embarked on a field trip to Brazil. I collected material to my master's and later also to my PhD thesis about healers, spiritual healers, energy healers. So my biographic case studies dealt with different dimensions of their lives. I wanted to understand, why did they become healers? And how did they embark on their path? How did they hear the calling? And how did they learn their healing methods? And what do they mean under disease and health? How do they communicate with the spiritual sphere, with their guides? And how do they perform their rituals? Well, what I did not know back then was that my quest for understanding their lives will forever change mine. These healers, or as they like to call themselves, mediums, they went through an immense transformation. They listened to their calling, broke free from their past. They excavated their hidden gifts, this potential that we feel in our soul, and they shared it with their communities. Their life was filled with service, purpose, and meaning. They were simply conduits of love. And how I see them today, they were really aligned with their soul and inhabited their soul home. So just by being close to them allowed me to glimpse mine. So from my first visit to Brazil in 2003, I was met with a sense of familiarity, a feeling of belonging. But I didn't realize my homecoming until a specific event. I was walking along the streets of San Caetano after visiting a healing center from Edson Lorenzini. Edson is a remarkable medium. When he heard about my research, he invited me to his center. He allowed me to conduct my interviews, to do my recordings with the camera, to observe his work and just be part of his center. And he's someone who radiates immense inner peace and so much kindness. In that afternoon, I witnessed one of the most compassionate ceremonies of my time in Brazil. Edson, with a handful of mediums, was at service of hundreds of people in pain and despair. The people who come to these healing centers in Brazil, they are usually suffering from conditions that cannot be treated by the Western medical system, or they don't have the financial means to pay for a doctor. The spiritist centers that I visited in Brazil, they offer treatments free of charge. I felt humbled and touched by what I saw, tireless instruments of spirituality. Each one of the people who come into this center, they receive an individual treatment by the spirit guide of Edson. His name is Dr. Hans, and that day I had a chance to have a talk with him. You could even call an interview. I felt like I'm part of another reality. I was gifted with moments experiencing a realm that doesn't comply with the story that we have been told. After the ritual, I was heading to the train station. I couldn't stop smiling and my body felt weightless. And I felt like my heart was cracking open. It was full of joy. And then from one moment to the other, it felt like my soul took off. Like I was in another space. I was up in the skies, experiencing myself in a whole other way. When I looked at myself, I realized that I have never in my entire life felt such boundless happiness and gratitude for my existence and for my time in Brazil. I was one with spirit. I was presencing myself through the eyes of my soul. This is how I encountered my soul and how I experienced the homecoming within myself. It all happened almost 2 decades ago, but to reconnect to my soul is one of the most vivid memories that I have. And as hours passed after the event, the intensity of that experience, that connectedness decreased, but something within me shifted for good. From there on, the flow in my research was inexplicable. How people showed up, situations unfolded. I felt like a marionette of a higher power. But to be honest, back then in Brazil, I didn't understand what was happening to me. I just felt that I want to come back to this connectedness. I want to feel it again. I want to learn how to be in that space again. But after returning to Europe, I was knocked out many times from alignment. My connection with my soul went on and off. But every time I came back with a bit more clarity, awareness and understanding, and also the capacity to stay for longer periods of time in my soul home. I realized that even after an initial powerful awakening, it's difficult to stay awake to our soul. The connection will go on and off. So we might reconnect to our true nature, and then we might lose touch again. Because the heavy emotional baggage that we are carrying from our past, and also the adaptation to our hectic hamster wheel life, doesn't allow us to stay in tune with our soul. And that is why we need occasional reminders, these blissful experiences, these glimpses of our soul. Have you ever glimpsed your soul? I'm sure you have, maybe without even knowing what was happening. The circumstances and intensity of your encounter with your soul might have been completely different than mine. Maybe you were dancing, walking in nature. Maybe you were meditating. Maybe you were expressing yourself creatively or playing with your children or pets. You also might have gone through a very difficult period, experiencing a lot of pain inside. And then suddenly there was an epiphany, like a direct insight into the nature of reality. You anchored into your soul's present, and suddenly something shifted within and you saw everything from a whole other perspective. So you don't need to go to an exotic place to meet your soul. And it might be that your encounter didn't look like mine at all, but there are some common characteristics in how we experience our soul. We experience our soul when our experience is free, unfabricated and spontaneously arising, when we are relaxed and authentic, when we are not pretending to be one way or another, or when we are not conditioned by the past or by any mental images or self-concepts. Awakening to our true nature and reconnecting with our soul doesn't happen by our doing. It's not something we can achieve. It cannot be controlled. It happens when it happens. Just as we can't control when a flower blossoms, but what we can do is we can create the right conditions, nurture it, set it in the sun, give it water. So when time is right, then it can blossom and unfold its beauty.